slightly different to the view. Almost. Tēnā koutou katoa. Nā mai, haere mai, ki whangarei aki watui. Tuesday, in the 6th of April. I have asked Aaron if he would open our meeting.
Mulle koitoi makuita ulkonia whakaparatini hurai mo tātai nāri inoi E pākotini mātua kome mo tāpai o tāroa ni te rāna i tū mātai ni whakitei pākotini. Rangi o tāroa te rere huatango, tō mai o mātua i tēnei rā. Nā rere te kai o te runa mai tō ringa kāroa te tauta rangi mari ka wai nui o mātou, a whenua pia mātou pia māra mai wini kui papa whakatakotini aki o tātai ni aroa. Nā rere te kumatu rini ino i tira ki te mataki ta mātai koe. Amen.
Thank you, Aaron. Councillors, we have apologies this morning from Councillors Deeming, Peters and Reid. What would I move those apologies? Councillor Cocker has moved, Councillor Deeming is seconding. Those in favour, aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Just a reminder, councillors, this is a public meeting. We do have members of the public, which is why I'm continuing to wear my mask. And it is just a gentle reminder for people to be wearing masks if they can. I know it makes it difficult to hear, but it is an important part of our protocol. And Councillor Murphy is joining us via Teams. Councillors, today we have one item on our agenda, the Animals Bylaw Deliberations Report. Can I welcome our staff members and our contractor, as well as members of the public. Just FYI, I brought along a box of submissions to the Animals Bylaw, just for a reminder of the intense interest that this issue had when we put out our Animals Bylaw, particularly around the animal known as cat. Most of it domestic, some of them stray, some of them feral. So, councillors, this morning we have two options available to us. And I would call for somebody to move one of the options. Councillor Cupforth has got a pen up. Councillor Cupforth.
Thank you, Worship. I'd like to move option 2.
Do you mind
Would you like me to read it out?
Yes, I will, please.
Okay, so option 2 is A, approves amendments to the proposed bylaw as contained in the statement of proposal adopted on 21st of October 2021 to provide for mandatory desexing and microchipping of cats prior to the final bylaw being presented to Council for adoption. B, approves $87,000 per annum funding for an animal compliance and education officer commencing with the 22-23 annual plan. And C, notes that the funding under point B will provide for education and reactive complaint management. If a higher level of service is sought by the community following adoption of the bylaw, this matter will be reported back to Council.
Do I have a seconder for that recommendation? Councillor.
I've just got a question if I could.
Councillor Benny.
So just a little bit of clarification for me. So option 1, B, approves the funding of 50k for the slip and chip. If we go for option 2, there is no...
Is there?
Pardon?
The question is there?
Well, yes. Sorry, do you want to carry on, or?
Okay.
Sure. Right, so if we approve option 2, there is nothing in that option that says about the 50k per annum for the slip and chip. So wouldn't it be prudent to go with B included in option 2?
I think that's a good question, Councillor Benny. Aaron, are you able to clarify for us whether that funding in option 2 includes the snip and chip program, or is it?
Yes, it would, and there are also opportunities. Oh, sorry, no, but this provides the opportunity, obviously, to have those discussions. So if we were looking at the 87 is for a staff member to be going out and doing the proactive work that we're seeking. The snip and chip with the 50k to the SPA sits separately. But there's nothing stopping the forum from requesting that into option 2 as well.
And just to clarify further, there is still 15k per annum for the first 3 years of the LTP anyway, and that would remain. It's just ongoing, and I suppose the next LTP that could change.
Yes, that's correct. I've also spoken to Jim Finance, and we've halved the way for any option.
Thank you.
Sorry, I do need a seconder for the recommendation so that we can have discussion. Councillor Golightly seconding that. So Councillor Sorry, Councillor Murphy, thank you, but Councillor Golightly got ahead of you. Councillor Cuttle.
Thank you, Worship. Just to clarify, I think, my understanding is the 15k per year remains. If the council wishes to move an amendment for the additional 35k, I'm not opposed to that, but yeah. So I'm moving option 2 because I think, as Her Worship has pointed out, there's been quite a weight of submissions, and the weight of submissions have been very strongly in favour of council taking a stand itself in terms of supporting the community around responsible pet or cat. Sorry, I see pet and cat as interchangeable, so cat ownership. While I don't have any problem if this council wants to put funding towards a snip and chip program, I think our role in particular and our priority has to be to bring in some form of bylaw so that we do have a way, this council has a way of managing issues that at the moment we find very difficult to manage around cats. And they are the extreme issues of neighbours with, 27 cats. Those type which are affecting our residents, basically quiet enjoyment of their properties. So I think what we've seen with the submission process, that of course if we give people the option of would you like some funding with that, of course people are going to tick the box and go yes. But the funding, I think the funding for snip and chip, while I support it and I wouldn't oppose it, I think it takes the priority away from really expecting that cat owners will take some responsibility themselves in terms of doing things like desexing and microchipping. And I think that's really our role, more than just providing funding. It's a bit like, give a person a fish and they'll eat for a day and give them a fishing line and they'll be able to catch their own fish. It's the same, it's taking a more preventative approach, I think, than just continually this council giving out funding for the for desexing and microchipping. I think it's a lot more appropriate response from council, and it means primarily, I think our role is going to be educational. And if you look at what's happened with other councils who have brought in this type of bylaw, primarily their role has been educational and just dealing with the real extreme things that have an impact on people's and public health. So I'm really hoping that councils will support the bylaw. We've had a really strong community response to it, and I'd really like to thank Judy in particular, who's in the chambers, but other people too who have really got behind and really got this message out to the community. I think we've had an extremely good response. We've had a very long discussion process around it, and I think this is really the upshot of that. So I'm really hoping councillors will support option 2.
Thank you. The motion. Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Councillor Peters, it's nice to see you join us as well. Councillor Cockburn.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I just have a continuing on the line of Councillor Benny's questions. I have another question on that same sort of line, Madam Chair. Option 2 appears to show that it's employing another staff member within council. Is that correct? Yeah. Whereas option 1 does that allow for the SPCA, which is presently doing the service, to actually continue doing the service of education and compliance? So, Madam Chair, my question then comes down to is why would we be doubling up on service which has already been done by our community?
The question that you need to put into the decision making is whether or not we change our bylaw. So that is the issue, taking into account all of the factors that the provision of services in our community. I hear your question, but I think the focus today is the deliberations on the submissions that we received to our Animals Bylaw.
Madam Chair, I understand what you're saying there. I'm actually asking questions about the motion which has actually been put before us. And yes, there is a part which is referring to the bylaw change. However, there's also a part talking about employing another staff member, as versus the other option of which is basically allowing the Spca to continue doing their job. So I'm quite conscious that while you refer to the bylaw, there is actually another part there which is actually referring to what the cost will actually be to council, and something which we haven't taken to the annual plan process as of presently.
That is specifically noted in the annual plan. So, Councillor Cockrell, I think you, in your deliberations of your decision making, need to look at the implications of both of those options. If you wanted to move an amendment, given that you only asked a question, you will be able to move an amendment. Councillors, any other discussion on the motion? Councillor Martin?
Yeah, I have some questions. With option 2, the 87,000, is that just for wages?
No, to the chair, no, there is also an operating expense as well.
It's covered in item 4.4, Councillor Martin?
Yeah. So that covers the car and all of the expenses of a staff member?
Yes.
That's all. So how are the current providers, who often do a lot of it for free, and assist people who can't afford it in de-sexing all animals that need to be done, how are they going to fare in here when we are selecting one organisation, like the Veterinary Association? Significant amount of animals that are treated now. This is going to give a priority to one organisation. It'll be like a new business that council is subsidising to assist with. Is that the intention of this?
I think the intention of this is to find an avenue where we meet the expectations of the public. Obviously, there are going to be some people that are doing the good work and amongst our communities on a voluntary basis. I've envisaged that would continue.
Councillor Martin, just to clarify, I don't think there's anything in the motion, either of the options, that indicated any funding for a specific organisation. There's no inference that one or another would be supported.
In option 1, it says
Yes, that's true.
approves total funding to Spca.
Correct, yes.
That is not fair. I don't think that's right.
But that's not the motion. Well, that's not the motion we are discussing. We're discussing the motion is option 2, it's been moved and seconded.
Well, then I'd like to move option 1. Personally, I don't think either of them are achievable.
Councillor Martin, so Councillor Martin has moved an amendment for option 1. So
I'll second it.
that. Councillor Cockrell is seconding. Councillor Martin?
Yeah, well, that's my concern, is the questions I asked and they've been reinforced. I think we'd be an awful lot better off if we just put the 85 grand into subsidising the people who are doing the job now to complete the work and carry on. We could do a marketing campaign. We could identify places we already have within the bylaw the ability to go and nuisance pets. And I think that we should be using that and using the money to get an outcome instead of just employing another staff member. We're getting into some fairly rough times in this country, and nobody's really aware of what's happening with all of the things that are going on. Interest rates, everything else rising. And we just need to be careful, and we go through an annual plan where people come in and go desperate for small amounts of money to keep going, and we're going to put money into something that's going to
be a disincentive and not assist the current people who are doing all the work now. And all of the vets are doing this kind of work. And if we gave a subsidy and said it's free to take them there, boom. And 87 grand would go an awful long way towards that. And I'd love to have this discussion in a couple of years' time to see just how much it's going to cost per cat by the time we finish doing this.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Councillor Innes.
Question, Your Worship. Now that we have the amendment before us, which is option 1, my question really relates to, first of all, it's $50,000 as I understand it. And then I look at the Spca, which is central to it, and my question is, in terms of Spca, does that involve education and working with community groups, or is it purely a snip and chip campaign? That's my question.
Through the chair, the allocated amount were approximately 500 snip and chip within the Spca. That's what the allocation is for. We know the peripheral outcomes of that is anyone engaging with the Spca is receiving the advocacy, educational verbatim as they engage with the Spca to get their cats done. So that's going to happen as a peripheral by default, not so much in campaigns, but in getting the outcomes and ensuring that our cats are snipped and chipped.
Then can I ask another question? The animal compliance and education position, the dominance of that, is that an educational role, working with community groups, or is it an enforcement role?
It's very much an educational role, ensuring that the face of this new staff member would be out there engaging with the public on a daily basis.
Then a third question, Your Worship. When reading through the information, there's a question of credibility in terms of passing a bylaw and not being able to enforce it. So do you see that as an issue in terms of the initial motion?
Through the chair, yes, I do see that as an issue, and I don't think that anything that we do in the chambers is necessarily going to change the culture of our communities overnight. However, it's a step in the right direction.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship.
Councillor Murphy.
Thank you. I hope you can hear me okay.
Yep.
Yep, okay. Oh, good. I think the key, the Mayor said earlier, the focus today needs to be on whether we're creating a bylaw or not. I think the value of creating a bylaw is that we're actually going to enforce the issue, which is to stem that flow of unwanted kittens, which end up out in our communities. And I think when we remember that it was the professional animal welfare organisations that came to us to talk to the need for a bylaw, and it will only be a bylaw that actually looks at stemming that flow. So I mean, you can give money year after year for snip and chip, but I think that's kind of ambulance at the bottom of the cliff. What we need to do is, and like our manager said, obviously it won't change the culture of our community overnight, but I think by putting a bylaw in place, mandatory de-settling will start to reduce that number of unwanted kittens that are getting dumped out in the environment. Every cat deserves to have an owner and to be loved. And I think that this is a really, really good way of starting to start that culture. I just had a question, so I support the original motion. There isn't anything in the motion that kind of talks about the date that we'll bring it in, and whether it will be, by all cats must be microchipped and be set by a certain date. So I was just wondering about that.
Through the chair, no, we haven't put a cap on the date as such, with hard enforcement. And again, but there's open for discussion. The thoughts, I suppose, behind that were that as we move through this, a time may be decided that a time cap is suitable, and it may be decided that it isn't. And I think that's probably up for discussion as well amongst the chamber.
Thanks, Erin.
The only other thing I just wanted to add was that I think the value of having an animal education officer, they will add a lot of value. We have issues as well with our dogs on Wellington bylaw, which currently we cannot do a lot of education with the community about that. So I think that the officer can provide value when we look at, whether it's wandering stock, dog issues, as well as cat issues. I think it would be really positive. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Murphy. Councillor Peters.
I favour option 2, and this is because I believe that by bringing a bylaw in, we will socialise, even though it cannot be, we haven't got the ability to enforce it. It will socialise the chipping and de-sexing of cats. I really like cats. I've had cats in my dog and they've been good companions. All of them were de-sexed, and I believe that by making it a normal thing, bringing it in as a bylaw, we will move towards everybody expecting to do that with their cats. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Peters. Councillor Benny.
I agree with a lot of what Councillor Martin said in this talk about that option 1. And these are really uncertain times with things like climate change. However, the thing for me, which I'm starting to really worry about, is the predator-free 2050 that we all talk about, but we do nothing about it. I think option 2 gives us an opportunity to lead, to do something about this, to move, to make positive changes towards achieving something, rather than say 2050, predator-free, let's leave it to the government. We got the opportunity here to play our part in a small way to lead. Several councils around the country have already done it successfully, so we're here. And I think that this gives us a real opportunity to be leaders, to put, instead of this, it's so easy in council to do nothing, let it carry on as we are, and achieve nothing. So I see option 2 as a start towards achieving the objective towards things like predator-free 2050, and I support it for that reason.
Thank you. Just to be clear, that is the original motion, option 2.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Councillors, any further discussion? Councillor Cooper?
May I ask a question of Shireen? I think I said that right, please. I think in the workshops we heard that there were councils that had implemented a mandatory de-sexing as per option 2, had provided for education but hadn't funded a compliance officer. Is that correct? Have I remembered that correctly?
Through the chair, thank you for the question. So we undertook some further research after the briefing last week, and due to Easter we weren't able to get hold of all councils, but we spoke to a range of councils. Southern District Council, Palmerston North District Council have not funded anything in additional to the bylaws, and the report talks about the feedback from the regulatory enforcement staff about that. Wellington City Council is the outlier in the sense that Wellington City Council, after it made the bylaw in 2016, came into force in 2018. It employed an animal compliance officer, I think was the job title, apologies. And that role was to, that role is 80%, it says in the report, that role, its function is to undertake education and active campaigns, and it's 80% of her role. When I had the conversation with the staff member, 80% of it is around education activities. That staff member also works with 2 trusts to trap and de-sex cats. So that role actually physically goes out and undertakes trapping of feral cats to then deliver them to those trusts who then take over the cats. Does that answer your question? Sorry, I got lost.
No, I think it does, may I speak?
Yes, and councillors, I will remind you that all of that information is in the agenda report.
Was that there? Because I thought I'd read that, but then I had a quick look now and couldn't find it again.
On page 2 and 3.
Well, what do you know? Somebody must have been talking and taking my concentration, your worship. However, I hear the arguments that are being put forward, and I do believe that we should. I will not support option 1. I will be supporting option 2, and the reason I support option 2 is the fact that we must, as Councillor Benny has said, something needs to be done. The submissions are very much in favour of us taking a stand. $87,000 is, on the one hand, if you have to earn that as a wage earner, is a lot of money. On the other hand, if you're building a roundabout on Loop Road, it probably wouldn't even fund a day's activity. So we've got to get it in context a little bit. I think I worked out one day we spend about $420,000 a day in this council to get through a $160 million budget. Maybe it was a week. Anyway, point is I'm supporting option 2.
Just the original motion. Thank you. Councillor Connor.
Couple of questions, please. If there was no bylaw, from what we've had from the submissions, from especially the vets and whatnot, they said that they wouldn't be able to do anything more than they're able to. Could they? Because if there was a bylaw, they'd be able to kind of enforce it and support it. But
I do recall the Vet Association spoke of the benefit it would have to the members to say that they're in this district mandatory desexing and microchipping of cats. So that gave them that tool to say to somebody who brought a cat into their practice that in this district it's mandatory.
So different question. Within bringing in a bylaw, would there be exemptions available for certain individuals, whether they be a business, whether they be for some reason? Would there be exemptions available for cats or whatnot, for if they're a cattery or whatnot?
Through the chair, we have noted that such things as catteries, breeders would be given exemptions.
And another question following on from Anna's one within the enforcement laws, you answered it prior with a specific date. How would we implement that around? If it's mandatory, obviously you're going to have to phase it in there to get it through, because getting everybody in at once is not going to work. Will it be a more educational approach with the enforcement, or how will we implement that at the time?
Again, through the chair, and there have been a lot of records from other councils in terms of how they get this across the line, and it does seem to be the general consensus is that it's gentle education. I think if we use Wellington as a prime example, we've also got to take into context that they have Zealandia, and the Wellington community are absolutely bought into the whole concept of what Zealandia means. So everybody's a lot more aware of pets in the neighbourhood. There's a massive program going out where they have traps in their backyards, and it's really taken off. So we kind of dealing with a different kettle of fish here. But the general consensus is that it needs to be phased in gently. It needs to be backed with a lot of advocacy and education.
Last question. With the implementation of whichever, if with the bylaw thing or whatever, are there any limits being set on the number of cats? I couldn't see that. No, there's not.
That's not the intention. Through the deliberations, we haven't indicated that would be the option that council would prefer, so no limits. But there is still the clause 6 under the public nuisance, if there were multiple. Councillor Prothero?
And Chair, I have a couple of questions, if it's possible. Councillor Cooper asked some questions to Shireen, and I wonder if Shireen can actually possibly answer, what is the Wellington City Council actually paying for their compliance officer?
Through the chair, I'm sorry, that is information that I didn't ask of that enforcement officer. I can answer in general that bigger councils pay slightly more than smaller councils, and I would imagine that it's not hugely dissimilar to what's being quoted. It will be more, but it won't be hugely dissimilar. It would be my expectations, but no, I don't have the answer to your question.
And with the options that are being put forward, the SPCA at present moment will still be, both options, the SPCA still will be getting the 15,000 for the next 3 years. Yeah. And through, you mentioned I understand, and you can this is a clarified question here, the SPCA went through their 15,000 in 3 months, is that correct?
Through the chair, apparently it went through the funding. Sorry, through the chair, the funding was put out recently, promoted. That funding was for 600 vouchers. The $15,000 was topped up by $33,000 by the SPCA. It was a $48,000 campaign, and all $600 vouchers were distributed in a matter of weeks, according to the general manager.
Do we know if they were taken, or like actually applied to desexing, or were they just taken by people?
So through the chair, the uptake of vouchers was in a matter of weeks. As I understand it, the program is that the SPCA works with vets who make themselves available to, there is a shortage of vets available, so vets that's the wrong term, make themselves available for this funding program, and they are on a roster, so, but I haven't got any data on how many cats have actually been desexed and microchipped at this point in time with those 600 vouchers.
Chair, will the staff actually know how much the SPC is actually underfunded a year? Do you have any idea of that?
Sorry, through the chair, would you mind repeating the question?
How much is the SPCA actually underfunded every year?
The short answer is
I don't think that's a question that Shireen is able to answer. It's an unfair.
The reason I'm asking this question, Chair, is within their submission, and I refer back to the comments that they specifically made, which was that they were also providing the education program. They're also going out there and doing additional information on how to look after animals. So the SPCA is actually already doing a lot of the stuff which our staff member will be paid to do. So I'm just quite conscious, Madam Chair, and this is the reason I'm asking these questions, is I'm trying to understand whether we're actually be doing something which we're actually taking work away from the SPCA, which is actually specifically set up for that purpose. So would a program that we are putting in of creating another staff member actually help the situation or hinder the situation?
I don't think that's, again, a question that we can answer. It's something that you will have to weigh up in your decision making. Councillor Holmes.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is a bit of a tricky one, because I think we all agree that we've got to do something. It's the way we do it. And Councillor Martin made some really good points before, but if I'm going to be consistent with what I've been trying to do for the last probably 4 or 5 months, we're heading into an annual plan process, and here we go, we've got another judgment we're going to make prior to the annual plan process. I'd suggest that if this stood up against a lot of the community asks in our annual plan, it wouldn't get funded to $87,000 if we had to look at our submissions. And so here we are preempting our annual plan process again. I voted against our grants increase last week, and for the same reason, because we prejudge what we're going to do in the annual plan. We all know we've got to find 7.7 million for the extra cost of the civic centre next door in the annual plan process. So here we are, all loading up, and we've got the cheek to go out and ask our community to put submissions in for the annual plan. We had no 87,000 in prior to that, and that really concerns me. Now, there's no financial discipline around us at all. And looking at this item, I think we all want to do something, and I think I like the voucher system. I don't like quantums. I think all vets are capable of doing this, all practices. But it'd be good to set up a veterinary clinic, a bit like some of the medical that for cataract operations, where they have it set up and just reduces the cost probably 10 times per visit to people, but they get the job done. And and the other one is the Spca. Only a couple of years ago was bringing up, this should be with conditions. Like the Spca was bringing back cats from Wellington to rehouse in Monterey. Well, I don't want that. We can't look after the cats we've already got in Monterey. But I certainly wanted to go down the de-sexing part of this and make sure we try and control the cat numbers. But so there's an amalgam of some of these 1 and 2 that actually probably work a lot better. But the prejudgment of funding, an extra staff member here is not going to make a difference for another 6 months anyway. And so we're going to lose out. But it's a really concerns me about how council is adding all this cost prior to our annual plan process. We just last year, went through the long-term plan and put all the money in. Our own projects, we haven't controlled the cost of our own projects, and here we go again. This 87,000, next year will be 150,000 because the council's got a habit of multiplying this type of thing. And you sit around and it's a bit like in our grants committee. You remember we had one person, now we've got 5. Doing the grant, we had one person do all those applications, now we've got 5. We have no more benefits. The community get no more benefits. So why are we doing it? And it's just a reminder. The moment, if vouchers is vouchers, you said, well, if some people qualify, and the other one is who selects which cats get de-sexed? It's the richest guy in the district or the poorest? Where's the qualifications in this whole article there, whole agenda? Surely there have to be some qualifications in there. People who can afford it should be doing it. And why should we be subsidising people who should be doing their responsibility anyway? Why should I, as a ratepayer, and any of those people outside in our community, subsidise people who've got cats, know the right practice, and should be doing this properly? It's just, we're tending to get into a field where we're subsidising people who certainly don't want to be subsidised, but more importantly, this agenda is far too open for me. So, it's a hard one, and I'm certainly not supporting the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Hobbs. Councillor Innes.
Thank you, Your Worship. If I could speak, I will speak in support of the initial motion, option 2. First of all, I'd really like to acknowledge the number of public submissions. They were overwhelming, and I appreciate what Councillor Holst is saying, but I feel the amount of submission that we've received on this matter is almost unprecedented. So it's really going through, looking, I must admit that I didn't read all the submissions, but going through the submissions, I'd also like to acknowledge yourself, Shireen. I know how difficult it is to receive such a large number of submissions, and the ability to be able to bring it down to a few points. And I think what we have in front of us now gives us a good understanding. My feeling is that we really need to have a proactive approach in this. And part of that, of course, is always going to be education, working with the community to be able to do that. And I've seen how effective other work within and I think of cats as pests, not just pets, you know. So the other P, and the other P is not attractive in the environment. In terms of that, working with the community is always strong. The only area that I felt we've fallen down a little bit in our recommendation or in supporting information really is in the job description of the Animal Compliance and Education Officer. And I picked up Councillor Coccarello's comments that it was an Animal Compliance Officer. Well, to me, it's an Animal Education Officer, because I really want to see that proactive approach come through, and I'm also aware of some of the issues that we have with dogs, and I would hope that it would go beyond cats. I don't know about bees, but that was the other area that we had submission on. So I won't be supporting the amendment, but I will be supporting the initial motion, option 2. I would like to see the job description of that position at some stage, should the initial motion be put through. I feel that SPCA is well acknowledged. There's funding going through to SPCA. There's $15,000 there. And I'm sure that when we look at this job description, there will be a close relationship between SPCA and this position. So thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Ennis. Before I ask for other, I'm going to just speak.
Yeah.
I came to this with an open mind. I still have. We have not finished the process. We will be putting a recommendation to Council for the adoption of the final bylaw. So we would be deciding whether or not to change the bylaw to include the provisions in the original motion, or whether no change to the bylaw, which was, I note, the recommendation from staff for option 1 in our paper, to no changes to the bylaw. So I've been listening to the debate. The things that I'm considering that, as Councillor Holst pointed out, we do actually want this. The community is looking for some direction from our council as to whether or not how we deal with the problem cats in our district. For me, the most effective is to fund the organisations that support that program. So from my perspective, option 1 appeals because of that increase in funding to an organisation that provides excellent work in the community, the Snip and Chip program, and it shows that there's good uptake for that. So on the one hand, I think that is a very solid recommendation to go with that option. The contra to that with option 2 is including a staff member and an Animal Compliance and Education Officer that also continues the $15,000 investment into the Snip and Chip program, but it does give us a staff member with that focus. I also hear the comments about how effective a person would be, and with the education aspect, and personally, I think the funding for the actual work on the animals would be more effective from my perspective. We're looking at whether or not we invest $87,000, and the point around the annual plan is a valid one, but we started this process in May 2021, and for lots of different reasons, this process has been delayed, and that is unfortunate. I also want to acknowledge Vita, who did a tremendous amount of work when we first got those more than 1,000 submissions. So the reason we are here today is that it has gone on for a very long time, and we all wanted some completion to this process because we started it so long ago. The dogs have a specific act. Cats don't. And I think we, as an authority, need to encourage the government to look toward a mandatory, across the nation, process for management of cats. We do it for dogs. Of course, the difference with dogs is that registration provides an income to provide the work within the district to do the work in dog management. I don't think that there would be much appetite for people to register, have a little collar on Safi, for example, who is microchipped and desexed and is kept inside at night. My cat. So thinking through all of those options, my preferred option is actually the amendment. However, if the amendment fails, I will be supporting the original motion, remembering that also the final decision about the bylaw is yet to come to council. So today's deliberations is to give our staff the direction to make any changes, if any, to the bylaw, which will then come to council for a final adoption. So, on balance and listening to the debate, I will be supporting the amendment initially. Councillor Popola?
Madam Chair, you've actually said a lot of the things I was going to say. I'm actually in total support of option one because of the exact same reasons that you said. To me, I struggled with the aspect of paying for another staff member to do a job which our Spca have been doing for years. If the original motion had turned around and said we were putting $87,000 towards the Spca so that they can do the animal compliance and education component, which they're presently doing, then I would have no issue. However, that's not the motion. So the motion was to create another staff member, and that I have an issue with. Especially when we have organisations out there who are doing this, who are underfunded and need to be funded. So in my view, option one, even though it does say that there's no changes to the bylaw, to me is the most realistic option because it allows our community to actually deal with the problem physically rather than just employ another staff, because I do not believe that employing another staff will actually help the situation at all.
Councillor Popola, I've got Councillor Park, Councillor Pepper.
It's me, thank you.
Colin first.
Sorry, carry on.
I'll speak to this. I'm hearing what people are saying about we're not wanting to pay for a job that should already be done to be able to get something done that already needs to be done. But this is such a big issue that it's not always going to be done by one group. It's almost like rubbish. Rubbish is everywhere. People always say, oh, you're taking jobs away from people who could be paid to pick it up. There's too much bloody rubbish out there to actually do it. We need volunteers, we need community support, and we need governments actually out there doing things as well. We need a whole team of people. It's not just this people should be doing it, that people should be doing it. Taking on some responsibility for this within our district, following other people, other districts that have already done their job as well, which is already supported in this. We're not setting a precedent, we're not doing taking a lead on this one, we're following an example that's already out there that's available. Putting the bylaw into place to support the vets to actually implement these things, because right now they can only suggest to people to do it. Like it would be better if you could do it, but actually if we actually listen to the vets who actually have to deal with this issue, they don't have any teeth to actually push this out and support it. And I'm also grateful to hear that we've got a gentle approach as opposed to a hard and fast approach, and like, that's it, yep, you're fine. Because it's a big issue, it's everywhere. They're out there, there's wildcats and stuff that we won't really be able to deal with. It's one of those issues that if we don't deal with the issue at the top of the cliff, it's going to be at the bottom of the cliff, and well, we all know where that gets us. I really acknowledge the support that the community has gone at a few individuals and the community support that have been given through the consultations, through the long-term plan, through the consultation, because they've both had a lot of submissions, which is fantastic. And if people actually wanted to have a say, and I really keep on trying to encourage people to have their say through consultations, even though sometimes they don't believe that we're actually doing it for them. We are. You brought all your submissions along today. Fantastic. I've got them all on my computer as well. It's one of those things that we need to make sure that the community is hearing us, and if we're putting things out, we need to make sure that we bring them along with us too, supporting them as best as we possibly can. Supportive education to actually get them along that way, to make sure we reach those people. And I've got a cat. She's desexed and she's got a microchip, and I paid for it myself. I don't think that people, and just following on though, I don't think that people who are able to do it will be one of those people standing in line waiting at the Spca to get one of those things. The people who actually are in desperate need of those will be the ones going out. It's been fantastic to see through the community as well, where the Spca has come out to be able to support with the gold coin donation, gold coin thing to actually get their cats desexed and brought along and dealt with, because they need that support, and there are those people out there that will, and if they know about it, they can then do it. I'm really grateful to see that obviously we haven't got the huge funding in there to allow the continuation of the step and chip. We've also got the 15K that is still going, which does support the Spca to do their thing, which does support the community in their efforts as well. It's one of those things that unless we support alongside, we're not going to be able to get an outcome that we want. And the community wants, who is actually providing that detail to us. We need to be able to support as much as we possibly can and show a bit of leadership, show a bit of direction. And it's a big issue out there. It's not going to just go away. As Councillor Benny pointed out about the 2050 pest free, we need to be able to support those projects, the goals. We may not be able to do it specifically, but it's a target that we can set, that we can move towards and actually limit. I do not support option 1, I support option 2, but I'm also very grateful that we're doing it in a way that brings the community with us, as opposed to hard and fast and will turn the community against us.
That's a comment. That's a helpful.
I just have a question for Stewardship, which is the Animal Compliance and Education Officer. Will it be solely focused on the cat issue, or will, as the title suggests, be a more generic job?
To the chair. So my understanding is this position is focused towards cats. However, there will be some focus around the griffins and other animals. But the main focus is definitely around cattle.
Don, did you have your hand up briefly?
I'm very keen to confirm Aaron's comments, but also note, obviously there were options in the original options report, which went through about 3 million for full enforcement. So this will be picked up on your feedback through the deliberations briefing, having a reactionary focus on enforcement, but obviously a strong education component. So just want to re-emphasise that it's a generic job title, but the focus of that year will be on the cat issues or any complaints that we get in education alongside that.
Thanks, Dawn.
So will it be another member of the animal enforcement team, if you like, but with a focus on cats? Is that all?
Through the TVs.
Okay, thank you. If I could just speak, obviously not in favour of option 1, but just to make a couple of points, and just following on, I think, from what Councillor Benny was saying, and also your worship. I mean, we have for years hoped and waited for government to bring in some national legislation, and we can continue to hope and wait, because I think that's where things are. Or we can do what other councils are doing, and that is taking what our community is saying, which is where they've expressed a strong desire for us to provide some regulations for compulsory microchipping and desexing, and actually put in place a bylaw ourselves. Now, as the Chief Executive has pointed out, and staff pointed out in the report, it's a bit pointless having a bylaw that in fact, it's probably illegal to have a bylaw that you can't actually police. So if we're going to put in a bylaw, then you do need to resource that bylaw. And I think that the funding that we're suggesting for feline education officer or whatever is actually a very modest amount, and I'm interested that it hopefully will be something that the team picks up on as a role, so it's not just allocated off to one person. But I think as Councillor Benny said, this is our opportunity to lead. Other councils have done it. In fact, we already have suburbs where, and developments where cats are specifically excluded. So this is not a new thing, and I think it is also the way things are going in the future in terms of this type of development. The other thing I just wanted to point out is the weight of many of the submissions came in with the long-term plan, and people at that point asked for both funding and also for a bylaw. So this process, despite what Councillor Holmes is saying about it suddenly turning up and putting money in outside sort of a financial process, is not actually that accurate. And the other point, I think, just around the SPCA, the SPCA has a very broad role in terms of animal care and welfare. And cats is only one particular part of it. And the fact that we've put funding in to support that part of it, I was interested that they've actually topped that up by double the amount, actually. So they have got their own funds, and people like me, when we die, give our money to the SPCA. So they do, they're not quite a very low resource organisation. And other organisations that have popped up specifically to deal with the cat issue, because the SPCA has a broader role, and that's organisations like Whangarei Cat Rescue, which in fact, as Councillor Holst suggested, do have a dog and dog desexing clinic, and that's all they do, is desexing. And I think that's fine, but as Councillor Murphy said, it's very much ambulance at the bottom of the cliff. And we can continue pouring money in through grants processes to that type of facility, or we can actually start trying to take a more proactive and educational role. And I think that's what the bylaw aspect actually allows us to do. We can still give funding, we can still encourage those organisations through our 5 community development staff to actually find funding from other sources, but actually having a bylaw brings in a compulsory element that people like vets, I think, would find very useful. So that's why I'm not supporting option 1.
Thank you, Councillor Cutfield. We'll take that as your right of reply as well. Councillor Cooper.
Thank you very much. Just a question really. I'll make sure I understand things absolutely properly before voting. Well, I understand it as option 1, everything stays the same except we increase the funding by $35,000 for the Snip and Chip program to $50,000. Okay. Whereas option 2, there's been a lot of talk about money, and Councillor Cutforth did mention, but first and foremost, it proposed an amendment which makes them mandatory, the desexing and the microchipping of cats. So that is a change from what we have at the moment, as I understand it.
Correct.
And as well as that, it adds $87,000 to our budget, plus the $15,000 that's already in the annual plan. So it comes to $102,000 that we would be spending if we go with option 2, which is $52,000 different than if we go with option 1. So there's a lot of talk about $87,000 and $50,000 and so on. The actual, what one of these is going to be adopted. If we adopt option 1, we're going to spend $50,000 and not have any standing to give people, the animal compliance people, the chance to actually address the problem at all. That's why I understand it. Whereas if we go with option 2, we put in place a bylaw which then gives the person who's being funded, the animal compliance and the compliance officer in general, the teeth to go out and actually make a difference. And the cost of that is going to be $52,000. Is that what have I read that correctly?
The 87,000 is additional to the 15,000.
Yeah, so the cost of that above option 1 is $52,000. So I guess what I'm saying is for $52,000 you get a law which gives you teeth and someone to educate the people about it. And the question is, I'm asking, is that worth it? And since I've already spoken, I can't pass an opinion.
Yes. That is the aspects that you will be deliberating in your own minds as to how you vote.
Just one question for you. Just one question. The number of people, Council has spoken about the number of submissions, in highlighted submissions. When you read the submission report on page 7 and attachment 8, A lot of them were unsigned, only single name, and would have been chucked out in the past. Because before that, not a qualified submission unless you put your name and address on it. So now we're getting to a state where we're being led down a path with 1,300 submissions, and in fact, most of them came through the long-term plan, 992 came through the long-term plan. So, we maybe got to get an education officer to fill out the long-term plan submission.
Councillor Hulse, that is not a question.
No, but mate.
Are we put the amendment? Those in favour of the amendment, please raise your hand. Councillor Cockerillo, Martin, Hulse, and Worship. Those against? Councillor Golightly, Cutforth, Benny, Cooper, Connor, Dennis, Peters, and Murphy.
Did anyone call for division? No.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper, for pointing out that I counted without a division being called. No, the division was not called, so the amendment is lost. I will put the motion. Those in favour, aye. Against?
Yes.
Carried. Thank you, councillors. That brings us to an end of our council meeting today. I will now speak to Aaron to close our meeting with
Kia ora no koutou, te mai te tēnei wahanga te rānei, nā reira te nui tātou. E pāne anō mā tau e tukuna tu wini whakawhita I kia a koe, ma te teimo mai o tō rangi maari e ko waimune o mātou, ma tā awhina whoki a mātou hei whakawhiti kōi o mātou. Nā hei te te kaihanga rehino o kia mātou o kia tu mātou nei tari mātou nei pāngai māhui tu kainga tia kino o kia mātou nei mo hono tāku tamari kia hararei ana mai ngā mai tu kura turu nātu tō ringa kaharawa kia tau tō rangi mari ko waimune o mātou ngā whānui e tēnā pitua te motu nei no ka paurianga. Tia kino o kia mātou nei kau mātou e mo e tūroro ana mātou e māhui e te kainga rātou katoa. Buat meeting, kita boleh terima tamu-tamu. Baik,